This is K-Rock Cast, the podcast where music and perspectives collide.
I'm Anne, a music lover who's the ultimate fan.
And I'm Kelly, a professional musician. Join us as we dive into the world of the Rose and other Korean and Asian rock bands.
Sometimes we'll agree, sometimes we'll wildly disagree, but what's guaranteed is a passionate, hilarious, and unfiltered conversation about the music that unites us and the bands that inspire us. Hi, everybody. We're back. This is episode 12, Into the Windfall. I'm excited, Kelly, to talk about a topic that I think our listeners are going to be really, really interested in. So, listeners, we're going to dive into the world of record labels, record deals, artist deals. This is something that I feel like we've talked around in some ways, Kelly, as we've talked about the history of the Rose, their past history with their former management company and record label J&Star company, talking about what it means to be independent now and manage themselves. And so I think it'd be good for our listeners to get more information about what truly it means to be an independent record label, for the guys to own their own label and really be managing themselves. And we're going to kind of do that, listeners, by Kelly going through just more information about record labels in general and all the different types of deals that you can have. And so I think this is going to be a really interesting episode. We're also going to use it as an opportunity, listeners, to highlight, we've been doing our Geniuses Behind the Scenes series. And so we're going to be highlighting a genius behind the scenes because we have our very own genius behind the scenes. Not all of our listeners might know this, Kelly, that you are the CEO of your own record label, Go Stepo Records.
I am. I can't believe you've just referred to me as a genius. You have met me, haven't you?
You are. You are. Don't sell yourself short.
Maybe I'm just
So I'm
foolhardy.
excited. Well, yeah, maybe. But I'm excited for you to, through this episode, talk about your experience in starting Go Stepo Records, talk about the vision of your record company. We're going to jump right in, listeners, with hot takes. We don't have a lot to talk about with the Rose this week, Kelly, which is like crazy to say.
Well, no, because we've not got much to talk about, but we've got an absolute load to talk about, but we can't do it in this episode because we've got to do an extra episode.
Yes. We have the last photosynthesis episode 5 drop, but we're going to save that, listeners, for our Into the Garage files. That was a fun episode. I can't wait to talk about that one.
Yeah, I think I might be piggy snorting while we run through that one, to be perfectly honest, but let's not go there.
Telling you, listeners, it is the hot era of Hajun in the world era. He was on fire in that episode, but
definitely.
We'll get into all his great one-liners. All his great one-liners. All right, we're going to start in our hot takes. Listeners, I mentioned the Korean rock band CN Blue toured in North America just recently. I think they're kind of wrapping that up now. And I think I had mentioned to our listeners that I had the pleasure of getting a ticket for their New York show.
Yes.
So I wanted to just share a little bit about that experience. Ah! Kelly,
They never come to Europe. Europe.
Let me tell you that I blame you for something.
Why?
Okay? And I don't know whether I should say blame you or thank you, but my obsession with drummers now. This is a slippery slope.
It's a very slippery slope. We don't go there. No.
Oh.
No.
Drummers are their own breed. And the drummer of CN Blue, listeners, he is extremely good looking.
He's exceptionally talented.
And an exceptional drummer.
He's an exceptionally talented
He's very
drummer.
talented.
Thank you very much. There you go.
Yeah. So just to refresh listeners, if you're not familiar with CN Blue, they are a Korean rock band consisting of 3 members. The lead singer, he also plays piano and multiple guitars, is Jung Young-hwa. Now, let me tell you, Kelly, that man, his stage presence is just amazing. He oozes charisma. He was someone that, you see those music artists and you look at them and you just say, that person was meant to be a performer.
Mm.
Like,
I've
he
kind
truly was.
I've kind of got that gist, to be perfectly honest, when I've seen little snippets of him and, sort of live recordings, and I've just thought, okay, yeah, I mean, he oozes charisma, but he's also exceptionally comfortable
He
on the stage, and that is something that's quite hard. And to a certain extent, you can't learn it. You have to be born with a certain amount of that.
think he yeah, I think so, and just incredibly talented. Like I said, he played throughout the show, he played 3 different types of guitars, and he played piano, and I'll get more into just kinda some of the highlights of his performance. His energy level was high. You couldn't help but be drawn into him. That's just how he is as a performer.
Yeah.
And then the bass and backup vocals is Lee Jung-shin, and then the drummer and backup vocals, Kang Min-hyuk. Oh my goodness.
Are we going to have another
And let me
sus
just say, I
warning?
made sure no, I'll hold back.
Good girl.
I'll hold back, I promise. No sus warning here. I I strategically placed myself where I had a very good vantage point of the drum set. So,
Of course.
yeah, that was
Why
on
am I not surprised
purpose.
by that?
I got some great footage. This was I mentioned this before, that this was significant because they really hadn't toured North America in 11 years.
Mm,
So, I don't know what prompted them to tour North America this time, but I'm so glad they did, and I don't know if, in Europe if they ever tour Europe, I don't know if they've really toured Europe much or if they come back to North America. If any listeners haven't gone to see them, you would not be disappointed in seeing them live. They really were incredible. They
yeah.
played a handful of cities, so I think it was only like 4 or 5 throughout North America. And where they played in New York, it was in Queens, and it was a really small venue. So it was like a warehouse style venue, all general admission, and it was a 2.5 hour show, Kelly. Wow. 26 songs.
Which I hate to say, when you've got that amount of a back catalogue, that's what you should be playing.
Yeah, they dipped into old songs. So I'll admit I only knew a good 3 of their songs, but shout out to my friend Melissa who came with me. She's a fan and she's been a fan of theirs of a long time. So she was giving me more of their history and she knew so many of the songs, but you could tell. I love when you're at a concert and you know when the audience knows a song that's like a fan favorite cuz
Yeah,
all the phones come up
yeah,
and everybody's taping that, performance. This is why I love live music. Like, even though I didn't know all but 3 of their songs, I was so into it, right? Like I just enjoyed it because they are incredible musicians. And then I was impressed. They did a lot of ad-libbing. They did a lot of just ever the song took them, that's where they went. You could tell it wasn't rehearsed. It was just riffing. And I thought of you, Kelly. You talked in an episode about how you can use a guitar to mimic a human voice.
yeah,
And he did that. He did this call and response back to the audience using his guitar like
yeah,
it was a voice. It was incredible. And then you can see that the 3 of them have been performing as a band for so long. They have incredible chemistry together and they know each other really well. That when he would riff and he would just play and play and play, and the drummer, Hyuk, was just following his lead, you know? And same thing with Jungshin, like just kind of following along with the bass. Like it was incredible. Yeah. I was so impressed.
when you get to that level and you've been playing for that long, you get into a habit when you're in that family foundation of a music unit. You have like a shorthand language between yourselves. They'll be playing and you might not necessarily pick up on it, but there will be just a slight sort of gesture and they'll know that actually we're going from that 12 bars into something else and then this is going to come afterwards. So it might feel as though it's completely improvised, and a lot of the time it is, because good musicians can improvise. They can do everything off the cuff. They don't need to have scripted ments and things like that. They're comfortable enough just to be able to go out and just be themselves and do it. Still have that little language. It's just a little look or a nod. And you know when a band is
Yeah.
rehearsed to the utmost level. And they're the best bands to watch.
I have to say Younghwa because the others, as I said, just do backup vocals. They really
Mm.
don't carry the singing. He has to sing the entire 2.5 hours, and just his singing voice is magnificent.
His singing
Um,
technique
and
is amazing. He has got but
his
he's obviously
yes.
spent years learning how to sing. You can tell he's
Yeah,
had
his
lessons on lessons, you really can.
that that man can belt.
Oh, yeah, the
Wow.
man's got lungs.
He does. And of course, I had to get I sent you a picture, Kelly, but I got, like, so excited because one of his 3 guitars was literally Sammy's guitar, but in red, and I got
Yeah,
super
it'd be
excited.
one of the custom mastered one masters ones.
I was
They
like, "Oh
are
my god,
good.
that's Sammy's guitar, it's just in red."
It's kind of an in vogue thing at the moment to have this, like, retro look, and I think it's just because everything's gone back to the
Mm,
'90s. Once upon a time, guitars go in cycles, so you'll have sessions where it's like everybody wants a Gibson SG, and that's what they go
mm,
towards. Then you get, like, the new metal movement, and it's just like, "You're not playing a Schecter, what's wrong with you?" And, then you get flying Vs and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. But guitars go literally the fashion accessories in a way. So they do have a cycle, and at the
yeah,
moment,
yeah.
it's custom masters at the moment. It's Fender's back in, but it's again indie and rock, so that it does tend to primarily be along the lines of sort of Fenders. When you get a little bit heavier, then you tend to go a little bit more towards Les Pauls because they're a bit chunkier. With the wood, gives them a warmer, deeper sound as well.
Well, listeners, if any of you don't really listen to CN Blues music, I think you should give it a try. I feel like if you are fans of the Roses music, I think their music, is pretty similar sonically. I think you probably would really enjoy it. If you ever get a chance to see them live, don't hesitate. It's so worth it.
I'm probably going to have to go to South Korea and see them, aren't I?
Or Japan. They actually
Ooh.
tour most heavily in Japan.
Actually, do you know
Yeah.
what? That's a good shout because then I can go and see Daring Grey.
You'll love it though. All right, Kelly, why don't you take us into our next artist? We have a new artist recommendation this week.
Some people might think he's complete new discovery, but he has actually been around for quite a while. So the artist I'm going to talk about is a guy called Michael Kim. Michael is a Korean American musician, a songwriter, and a producer from California. So initially, he gained recognition working with Epic High, and he had a full hip hop career. That was his thing. Then he suddenly sort of decided he was going to take a different route. And when I say a different path, I mean like completely different. You couldn't have gone anywhere else with this. And he created his own one man band, which is Salt and Paper. And he started experimenting with modern rock. It's really distinctive and expressive, and very much what you wouldn't expect if you'd ever heard any of his earlier work. Now, this is where people may have heard him and not realised he's got this huge back catalogue. And a lot of it is in soundtrack credits, which you wouldn't necessarily think of.
Mm.
But he has this huge background, especially in sort of K dramas. And so, if you've ever watched Encounter or Dr. John, and I mean, this is literally just naming two of a list of I don't know how many. Honestly, I mean, the man writes truly beautiful, emotive music that just has that cinematic push with it. So, he released an album in 2016, which was called Spin. And then the following year, he released More Than Just Circles. And it just screams quietly with just like heartfelt lyricism and delicate arrangements, which you don't expect for somebody that used to work in hip hop because it's like the complete opposite of what you'd expect. And this year, he has released a new EP, which is called Seaweed Soup. And that just dives even further into his psyche. And it's got the same melodic tones. It's a really beautiful EP. And I would say to anybody, go out and listen to it. It is worth your time. It is just a really beautiful EP. We had this as a recommendation from one of our friends and one of our listeners. And I listened to it and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
this is going to be stuck on repeat.
Yeah, I want to give a shout out, imagine_Boca on Instagram. Highlight this artist maybe in your artist recommendations. She was even thinking maybe we pursue him as a future interview. So we'll have
Is,
to
is this
see.
is this another
Maybe
one
he'd
I'm
be
going to have to get
interested.
brave with?
I know, maybe we'll Reach out, start doing an artist spotlight for him like we did with Francis Doom. Maybe
I
he'll
think
be
that'd be a
willing to
really
come on the
nice idea.
podcast.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but his music sounds great. So thank you for highlighting this, Kelly. Thank you to our listener for sharing this for us. And I mean, yeah, listeners, if you've got other artists like this that you think are great for us to highlight, send us a message, send us an email, hit us up on social media in our DMs. Let us know. We'd be happy to highlight them like we did with Salt and Paper. All right, so we're going to start our deep dive. As we mentioned, this is Into the Windfall. So I thought this is kind of a nice opportunity. We wanted to talk about this point in the Roses' history. So I think as we have been going through their discography, we've been walking our listeners through, Kelly, just the history of the Rose and
Mm,
what's been happening to them along the way in their career. And we're honestly at the point in beginning of 2020. If you remember, listeners, where we left off in their discography, it was the Red single album, which was released in, I think it was August of 2019.
yeah.
And then they went right away on We Rose You live tour throughout North America. And so we've been hinting along the way, I think when we talked a lot about the Dawn album and then into Red, that we could see that the guys were writing music and releasing music in really short amount of time. Kelly, right? They've been
Yeah.
on numerous world tours in only 2.5 years from the debut date. And so in February of 2020, they actually um, have a lawsuit against their record company, J&Star Company. And so we wanted to talk about this in terms of the history of the Rose, but we were thinking about the most appropriate way to do so. And I think what we came to was not just talking solely about that lawsuit, but actually taking a step back and educating people about record deals, record labels, what
Mm.
it means. And so I think, listeners, hopefully you realize in our show, we believe in information and we like to give a different perspective. And I think that's what we wanted to do with this episode. So before we talk about the lawsuit and ultimately what becomes the creation of Windfall as the Rose's own company. Kelly, why don't you walk us through record labels, kind of the
Yeah.
difference between major record labels, independent record labels, and so forth? So why don't we start there?
Obviously, one of the biggest parts of the music business at any point has always been a record label. This isn't a new thing. This literally goes back to the moment in time when somebody went, "Ooh, I can make money out of this." So you can imagine that was pretty early on. You have two types of record labels, and most artists, when they get to a certain point and they realize that actually this is more of a professional thing, this is a business, they will tend to go down one of two routes. They will look at possibly having something like a major record label deal or signing to something like an independent record deal. They're two very different animals and both have the pros and cons, and they are there to help the musician. But saying that, some of them, you've got to bear in mind, are conglomerate companies. They're also there to turn a profit for their shareholders. Major record labels are normally a multinational company and they own the mass share of the market. And the reason they own the market share of everything is they have the financial clout to do it. So they will offer an artist support in literally every form you can think of. So, from the production of the album to marketing to merchandise to promotion, even to like who's who and how they get there. Once upon a time, major record labels used to pluck artists from obscurity and they would take them and go, do you know what? This person's got raw talent. It's kind of in a way that sort of like models are spotted in the streets. That's how record labels used to
Yeah.
work as well. They don't anymore. Very rarely does this happen anymore because it takes time and it takes
Mm.
money, and sometimes it doesn't work. So what you tend to find now is a lot of record labels, especially in Europe. I think America still has a little bit of experimentation, but that's mainly because there's more money there. But in Europe, what tends to happen is they tend to gravitate to artists that are doing well on TikTok. So you'll find somebody who's already
Mm.
created their audience And then they go, oh, actually, we'll give you some financial backing and we'll push you even further because we can spin quick money off of you, basically. They're a cash cow, for want of a
Mm.
better term. There's the big three record labels: Universal, Sony, and Warner. They are the big boys. However, Hybe are slowly
Mm,
creeping their way
yeah.
up. Now, what's happened with Hybe is they've started buying established record labels, and last year
Yeah.
they bought out Ithaca Holdings. Now, Ithaca Holdings you may not have heard of, but in America they're huge, and the reason that they're huge is because they actually cover two of the biggest markets in America. You have the big label Machine Group, and they are a country
Mhm.
label, and there are huge artists on that, and we know how big country is in America. And then we've got the other one, which is Quality Control, and that's a rap label, and they again have some huge artists on that actual roster. They also have a partnership deal with Geffen, which literally pulls them in with even more cross-border stuff. And
Uh,
2023, they tried to acquire Sony Music, and the only reason they didn't get Sony Music was it was rejected by the shareholders, because otherwise they would be one of the big three.
Hybe has big hit music under them, which is BTS. So the juggernaut, obviously BTS, and Jungkook's solo work was actually distributed through Geffen Records.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think for Hybe, they bought Ithaca Holdings because they wanted a foothold in the United States.
Oh, yeah. I
You
mean,
know, they're
they just simply
dominating.
want
They
to.
want to dominate the West.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be perfectly honest, to keep the company going, that's what they've got to do. They've got to expand, because I hate to say
Yeah.
it, even they will probably notice at some point the K-pop bubble will burst. You can already
Yeah.
see that
They've
there's
actually
movements to different
they've
styles
even
and different genres.
established, big hit in they have Big Hit America and that's based in the United States, but then they also have Latin America.
Yes.
So Hybe is actually starting to do what I think nobody else of those K-pop, entertainment record labels have done, which is really tap into that Latin American market, which we know there are tons of
Huge.
K-pop fans and Korean rock fans in Latin American countries, and, it's a huge market. Yeah, Hybe will become soon at that level of Universal, Sony, and Warner for sure.
Yeah. So as we've just discussed, so majors are normally made up of subsidiary labels. So in that you will
Mm.
have smaller companies that sit within it, and they are all controlled by the parent company. So prime example, Music for Nations, who used to be an independent but were bought out and they're now part of Sony. They're a big label in themselves, but they sit completely under the control of Sony Music.
Sony still is driving the things that Music for Nations does, right? It means
Oh
that these
yeah, exactly.
subsidiaries can't just
Yeah.
go off and do their own thing.
No, they basically, the subsidiaries will go out and get the talent, and then the parent will sign the check. I think that's probably the way of looking
Yeah.
at it. If the artist performs to a certain extent and they think, oh, actually, do you know what? They'll be better under our direct umbrella. That's what they do. And they will pilfer the artist and move them under their main label. So major record labels work, and this is the old idea of I've signed a record deal, and you go in and you get a huge check for like
Yeah.
£1 million. But those checks, what they refer to as an advance, are paid out to the artist. And what people don't realise is that advance is basically a mortgage. And it is a mortgage that you have to pay back, and a lot of the time you will never pay it back. Most artists don't make money
Mhm.
in the traditional ways, and when we start going through deals in a bit, you'll understand why. I mean, they don't make any money. What will happen is you'll be given an advance, say £1 million. Out of that £1 million, you need to basically account for everything. So that will account for your recording, for your promotion, for your merchandise, the entire gamut of everything you need to do as an artist. It also needs to pay your wage. You can't just go out and buy yourself a Rolls Royce. You can't, it just doesn't happen. That is there basically as a loan. But by that, the actual label will take the mass majority of the royalties until they have recouped their money. And what you'll tend to
Yeah.
find is, depending on how unscrupulous the actual record company is, and this does happen, and I've heard absolute horror stories. So you'll get your advance, and then somebody will go, "Do you know what? You know that video you're thinking of filming? How about you do it in the Bahamas and with like explosions and everything else?" And it's like, "Yeah, that sounds like a great idea." It's like, "Well, why don't we do an extension to your record deal?" So there you go. That's another £1 million added, which is
Mm.
another £1 million that you've got to pay back. So artists, just
Mhm.
naive artists, people who don't have representation, legal representation, and people with the best interests for them will literally dive in head first and go, "Yeah, this is great. They're giving me all this money. I can do everything that I want to do," without realizing that they have to pay this back. Like a new artist who's signed to a record deal will only receive between 11 and 15% of their royalties.
Sh that's incredible.
Yeah, and that's until you've recouped. So once you've recouped, if you don't take any more money out to pay for other things, and then you get to the end and it's just like, "Oh, actually, I can have a bigger share of my royalties." So at that point, you get a bigger share of your royalties. But depending on what contract you've signed, the record label still gets a cut of your royalties, even though you've recouped
Oh,
the money back.
sure.
So it's like a mortgage that you're still
Yeah.
having to pay, even though you've paid your mortgage off. And the mass majority of the time, they own your masters, and the masters are the source recordings. So
Mhm.
whether that is the tape or a DAT or the actual stems from when it's been digitally recorded, they
Mhm.
own those. You never own those. So when people ask the Rose if they can re-release stuff from earlier on in their career, they can't, because they don't own the masters. That is the simple reason. They
Yep.
will literally have to re-record them. So I'll very quickly tell you one horror story. When I did my sound engineering and music management training, one of our tutors was a lady called Jessie, and she was one of the nicest ladies I'd ever met. She was brilliant and bubbly, and you just wanted to spend time with her because she was such a fantastic lady. And she was a singer, and a singer in a very successful dance band in the 90s. She signed a 3 record deal with a record label that will remain nameless, but they are one of the big three. And when I say one of the big three, I mean the big three, not a subsidiary. She went for a meeting to discuss their second album after releasing their first album and having several successful hits, not only in the UK, but in Europe as well. And we're not talking small hits, we're talking like top 10 hits around Europe. She went down, and the meeting, she went in and she sat with the representatives to discuss what was happening with the second album. She'd got most of it written with her team. They knew what they were doing. And they basically said to her while she was sat there, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, this is great. This is brilliant. This is all fantastic." And she said, "So what's happening with this second album? What's going on?" And they just went, "We don't necessarily think that you fit with our brand anymore."
Oh my
At
gosh.
which point she was like, "Oh, crap. Great. What do I do?" And they went, "Well, nothing. You owe us money." Because they hadn't recouped
Wow.
all of their costs, because they'd not gone out and done their second tour, which would have been the part that would have recouped costs. And at
Oh,
this point,
wow.
she walked downstairs, and as they walked out of the side door, there was a skip full of their first album. They hadn't even bothered to ship the duplication albums out for resale. They'd
Wow.
skipped them, and they were literally a tax write off. So she
Oh,
came
wow.
home and ended up working in a supermarket for quite a while until she picked herself up, God bless her, and went, "Do you know what? I'm going to be the cautionary tale, and I'm going to teach musicians what not to do." And thank God she
Yeah.
did, because
Yeah.
yeah. I think
Wow.
she's helped a lot of artists in
Yeah.
Sheffield, and I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of Sheffield artists are quite successful, because people like her are there to represent them and give them these cautionary tales.
You talk about, like, young artists that are starting out, you have a passion for music. That's why you're pursuing it.
Mm.
But there's so much you need to educate yourself on the business side, that these young artists don't have the training. And so, yeah, it's so easy to get yourself in these record deals.
It
Um,
it's just
yeah.
the joy of going, somebody believes in us, somebody wants to give us money, they're gonna let us do this.
Right,
and
right.
you just fall into it. One of the things with music is, and I think a lot of people don't understand, it's a business at the end of the day. And
Yeah,
it's a cutthroat business as well. It's not a simple business.
right.
So now we'll get on to independent record labels. Now, independent record labels are very much a very different beast altogether. They're normally much smaller. They tend to be local. It's very rare that you'll get an independent that's multinational. They do exist, but there aren't many. And they generally produce and distribute music without any form of backing. So a lot of indie labels are set up by musicians, and what they do is they generally work with emerging musicians, take people who are new on the scene, give them a metaphorical label home, and allow them to
Mhm.
develop naturally and organically. They allow the artists their own creativity, their own freedom, and they are frequently genre specific. What tends to happen is you will
Mm,
get like metal independent labels,
mhm.
you'll get grime
Yeah.
independent labels. We're not even talking sort of like a rock label, they will be like a subgenre within a subgenre a lot of the time, and they will
Mm,
normally only have a handful of artists on their books. So they have much smaller financial agreements. And the agreements tend to, they're not millions, you don't get huge advances. They'll go, right, it's going to cost this much to do it. And there isn't that sort of huge additional cost that's put on top to recoup back as a business. They make money, don't get me wrong, they wouldn't be in the industry if they weren't making money, but they're not rolling money like they do in a major label. There's a much
yeah.
closer bond between the artist and the label as well. So you don't have to go through A&R and an agent and somebody else and somebody else and somebody else. You literally, if you are signed to an independent label, you generally speak to the CEO of the label. They're shorter deals as well. So what you'll tend to find is with major labels, they will sign you up for so many singles and an album with an extension clause. So if it does all right, you're there for 5 albums. Whereas what will happen with an independent, usually they'll sign you up for like a couple of singles, an album, an EP, whichever it is. And then it's like a mutual extension agreement. So you don't sign your life
Mm,
away. In the actual contract clause, there'll be a bit in there and it'll just say, if we perform and you perform and actually we quite like each other, do you know what? Let's carry on working together. So it's a much nicer sort of way of working. Now, the only problem is with an independent, they don't have the clout, they don't have the market share. But saying that, there are independent record labels who have had huge clout to the point where the major labels have had to sit up and go, actually, what's happening here? Muse and Garbage, for example, were signed to a record label called Mushroom Records. So you had Mushroom Records in the UK, which was a twin of Mushroom Records in Australia. Independent, they just had two offices basically. And we know what happened to Muse. Muse went stratospheric. They started out, I mean, I was very lucky to see Muse play at the Foundry at Sheffield Uni, and there literally be about 200 people in there. The last time I saw them, they were playing Manchester Arena and there were 60,000 people in there.
wow. Holy
So,
cow.
yeah, exactly. So that's and I mean, Garbage have had a fantastic career as well, and they were signed in the same way. They were signed to an independent. They had a fantastic deal. Coldplay originally was signed to an independent, which is how they
Mm,
allowed to develop their sound and become who they
mhm,
are today. Again, huge artists. Now, Mushroom Records carried on for quite a while and then it was disbanded, is the way we'll describe it. But basically, Warner Brother came in and bought out their artists. What another thing with an independent as well. So sometimes they'll strike what they refer to as a profit split deal, which sounds ridiculous and garbled, but basically all it means is you sign to an independent, but the independent uses a major label for distribution, recording, and marketing. So they use the clout of a major to
mm.
distribute. So that's your two different record labels. And then, of course, you get people who self
Yeah.
release and they will literally just do it under copyright control and just do everything
Mm,
themselves. But you'll tend to find, from a business point of view, you better sort of as a record label.
mhm.
I mean, yes, liberating, but
Mm.
there's no one to fall back on.
I think I like that. I think it wasn't as scary as I thought. I think it was more of a really good learning experience for me. I really wanted to know how like the back end of things worked. For example, if I'm gonna distribute my music, how do I do it? Before that, I had no clue, so I would not know how that all works, the business side of it. I don't know how to produce a music video. Not that I have to produce it, but I need to know the steps so I could take care of the crew that I'm with. Little things like that. It was all a learning experience, and that's why I took that step to make my own company and kind of try it out.
So then we can get on to deals now. Deals. Oh dear God. Right. So deals. Where do I start? I think some of these they just make up as they go along, to be perfectly honest. I think it's probably the best way of describing it. You have a standard record deal, which is basically marketing and distribution are generally not included in a standard deal. It is literally, here's some money, go record an album. And then that standard deal will have bits bolted onto it like Lego. So then you'll have a marketing and then you'll have a distribution. And each bit that's bolted on will basically take more and more out of your back pocket. It's basically a loan that takes forever to pay back. It is the traditional model of
Right.
a major record label. Then we have the wonderful, wonderful, and I don't even know how these are legal. This is all I'm going to say. You have something called a 360 deal. Now, a 360 deal basically gives you all the support of a record label that you would ever want. You get everything and the kitchen sink thrown in, but you pay for it. This is the deal with the devil, and it's the only way to describe it. So when it's called a 360, it means everything. So every single aspect of an artist's revenue is taken into account. So that is sales, performance, merchandise, brand endorsements, even any additional activities. So for example, if you suddenly as an artist got a modeling contract, a fee from your modeling contract would be taken by the record label as well. Everything. They own you. Don't get me wrong, you will be a bright, dazzling star, but they own you. And that's the only way to describe it. And this will give you a rough idea. We'll get 10 to 35% of your income.
Wow. And I guess as you said, you would go into this because you just you want this dream, like you have this dream and you want it and it's being offered to you and it sounds amazing, I'm sure, as a young artist, that they would take care of all of this for you. Is that
Oh,
probably
you don't need
why
to
artists
worry.
would do a 360 deal?
Yeah, you don't need to worry. You can just do whatever you want. Well, yeah, you can do whatever you want, or
Right.
so you think. You can't. They will literally control every single aspect of your life, down to
Mm.
what you wear, who you deal with, who you seem with, and then they will take a cut of literally everything, probably including the air that you breathe. But this
Yeah.
is pretty
Wow.
much where most major record label deals are currently at. I mean, there are different cuts, so you can have a 270 and a 180. They're just basically different levels. So a 180 may not include things like brand endorsements and merchandise, but it includes everything
Mm.
else. This is where music lawyers come into their own, and they are the absolute unsung heroes of music. Then we get on to all sorts of different things. So, like, you can have a singles deal. So, as the name describes, you're signed up for a single.
Mm.
Now, actually, these are actually not bad for a musician. So what happens is you get a lot more control. You get a big lump of money to do your single, but because it's a single, you recoup quicker. And in the
Mm.
days of streaming, a lot of people just listen to singles. They don't listen to albums. It is it is a better way of dealing with it, and you tend to find dance acts do this. So a lot of EDM stars do this route. That's primarily where this came from. But obviously, with streaming being as huge as it is, it tends to roll out a lot further now as well. Then you get things like private EP deals. Now, this is an interesting one. You could be secretly signed to a major record label and you can't tell anybody. Miraculously, an EP comes out of nowhere and you have the financial backing of a record label, and a major record label at that. And then what tends to happen is it's just to test the waters. And if you do really well, you've already got it in your contract that you're locked in for the next how many years. But if you don't do brilliantly well, it doesn't matter because you can both walk away from the agreement. People don't tend to admit that they've received this, but it does happen. Then we have things like distribution deals, which, to be perfectly honest, every artist needs a distribution deal. So you have distribution deals with various different companies that will just do digital. And there's a lot of online ones. And it's just a basic sort of T's and C's. This is what you'll get. You'll get your royalties. We'll take a tiny cut, and so on and so forth. That is one form of the pressing and distribution deal. Or you could go to a major record label and have a distribution deal. And especially if you're doing physical, but they will deal also with digital and everything else as well, and radio too. But they will basically pay for the print, deal with the fabrication of the print, whether it's a CD or vinyl, or the really weird sort of fetish thing that's happening at the moment for tape cassettes, which is bizarre. But a lot of people are going
Yeah,
back
it's so
down
weird that's coming back.
It is. It is. It's really strange, but people like physical, tangible things that are in front of them. So I'm not surprised. But the great thing about a distribution deal is, and most artists will just aim for this alone. If they can afford to record their own stuff, this is what you want, because it allows you all the freedom just to be your own artist. You can control your music, and the royalty rates are minimum. So you don't lose much of your revenue at all. Obviously, you have to give a little bit because it covers their costs, but it's nowhere like a major record deal. So distribution deals, fantastic. I would generally say every artist needs a distribution deal, and that's what you're aiming for. Another thing you also want is a licensing deal. So a licensing deal is how you get your music onto films, TV, commercials, all of that good stuff, in sound, game soundtracks and various things like that. So again, these are exceptional for musicians. This is what you want, because you get an upfront payment because you've lent your music to it. But for every subsequent play of it, you also get your royalties as well. You want to be on soundtracks. So going back
Mm.
again to SALTNPAPER, that's why he writes a lot of soundtracks, and it's
Mm.
a fantastic way to go.
The Rose has done that. They haven't done a soundtrack in a while, but they had kind of, interestingly, when we're talking about this, of when they did most of those soundtracks, I feel like it was right after the lawsuit.
Yes.
So kind of that early time for them, which they probably did because it was an easy way to get some
Oh,
influx of money.
it's a great way to get revenue in. And to be perfectly honest, still one of my favourite Rose songs of all time is the Strangers soundtrack. I love
Oh,
that track.
yes. Yeah.
That's that,
Yeah,
honestly.
that'll be a future episode, listeners. We'll
And
dig
you,
into the
uh,
OSTs for sure.
yeah, wait until I start gushing about that one, because I will properly gush about that track.
You love your soundtracks too.
No, I am a soundtrack girl. I love soundtracks, so yeah, I
You
can't say
do,
anything
you
about
do,
that.
yeah.
And then obviously so we've got production deals as well. So a production deal is set up by a major record label, and they basically get you a producer in to work with, and that producer will develop you and develop your sound. And it works on like a 50-50 basis. So like the record label gets like a cut of 50%, and then the remaining 50% goes to the producer and the artist. So 20-25% each type of thing. Might be slightly a different cut of it. With that though, the producer keeps the masters. So
Oh,
if you're happy,
interesting.
so if you've got a good relationship with your producer, it's not a bad way to go if you need to pay for your recording. But I tend to find, like, reading into some of this stuff though, that people actually have got slightly, the businesses have got more greedy when you bear in mind people can record at home.
Right.
Which
Right,
is
yeah.
which is a bizarre thing to do. You'd kind of think that they'd want to sort of find new ways to do these things, but we'll get onto that later. And then we have the wonderful thing called an anti-360 deal. Gotta love an anti-360 deal. So this goes in complete objection to the 360 deals of the major labels. So an anti-360 deal, generally speaking, is what you'll get on an independent label, and they will very proudly state that this is an anti-deal. So this focuses more on the artist and what the artist wants, what the artist needs, and how they need to be supported. So they maintain control of everything. And they don't lose out in any form of the backing or the resources. And it's very heavily promotion and marketing, though. So a lot of the time, the artist will have probably produced their own music, and then you'll get this anti 360 deal, and they will basically help push you out into the world. And then the very last one, and then I'll stop waffling, and then, we'll take a break and look at something else, is artist deals. Now, artist deals are a bit of a weird one. So this is
Mm.
kind of like a 360 deal between a major artist and an emerging artist. So
Hmm.
you might get an artist that has this really big footprint, visibility, fan base. And while they're out and about, they might spot an emerging band or emerging artist and go, do you know what? We can help them. And what they do is they basically increase the visibility of the emerging artists. They get them in the right places to the right people. They introduce them. They get the deals quietly done in the background. Or a lot of the times, this is a 360 deal. So the partnership between the two of them means that the partner who is the established artist will take a cut, and probably a big cut, of whatever the
Hmm.
emerging artist is doing. And a prime example of this is One Direction, and they have 5 Seconds of Summer as their artist deal underneath them.
Yeah. So in that case, like, I don't know what record label One Direction might be under. Is there then also that 5 Seconds of Summer as part of the artist deal has something with the same record label that their artist One Direction would be on?
So what would happen is the main artists would go, I'm going to strike a deal with you, and I'm going to get you into this label. So you'd probably
Okay.
both
Okay.
sit under a major label, but the
Yeah.
actual artist deal would take a cut of what the emerging artist is going to get.
So, yeah, so that smaller artist is probably getting even less,
Yeah,
but
so
this
there's
was their
even
foot in the
less.
door with the major label.
So there's even less of the pie left. So the only good time
Yes,
to do
right.
that is if you have your own record label as an emerging artist and you strike a
Mm,
deal with an artist as a partnership to help get you visibility. Sound familiar?
interesting. So sounding familiar. So let's put a pin in that one, Kelly. And I think as we go through the history now of the rose, I think we're going to bring that type of deal potentially back up. Listeners, with that in mind, let's get back into the history of the rose. So we're now in February of 2020. The rose is under management of J&Star Company. And at that time, they filed for contract termination with their management company. And this doesn't happen very often, does it, Kelly, across the music industry when an artist does this?
It does happen, but it doesn't tend to happen in South Korea.
Oh, yes. Yeah,
I
for
think that's
sure.
probably the
For
way of
sure.
looking at it. It does happen, but it doesn't generally happen in that environment, shall we say.
Yeah. So I think already I feel like this was a bold move for the Rose. They're 2.5 years from debut. So they're not super established, as a
Still
band
early
or as a
days.
music artist in the
Yeah.
industry. Yeah. And here they are filing for contract termination against their management company. They had several key reasons that they stated. So I'm going to go through those. One was non-payment of earnings. So the Rose claimed that they had not received proper payments since their debut in 2017, with the agency failing to provide clear and transparent financial records to the members. Second was unreasonable scheduling. I feel like we kind of talked about this in just our
Mm.
own observations, Kelly. They alleged that the company imposed excessive and unilateral schedules without considering the members' physical and mental well being. And third, a breakdown of trust. The Rose accused J&Star of breaching their exclusive contract, citing a lack of communication and failure to address their concerns. So when the Rose filed this for contract termination, then J&Star came right out, denied all of these allegations, asserting that they had fulfilled all of their contractual obligations. They supposedly provided payment details and discussed schedules with the band. So they're basically coming out and saying, no, 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 no. We have evidence
Mm.
that the Rose is lying. That's basically kind of what they said. Like, they're lying, and we have evidence to back that up.
It's legal, it's legal, so it will be tit for tat because it always is.
And the agency accused the Rose of violating their contract through unauthorized absences and other actions, and announced plans for legal action against the group. So we have quite a bit of sources that are cited, listeners, within the episode description notes. And one of them includes, it's from K-pop Source, is the article. It does include a very long formal statement from J&Star. I'm not going to read the whole statement, but I thought there were a few sections of that statement that I felt like were good to read, that really showed J&Star Company's claims. Quote, although the Rose claims to have carried out 2 years of deadly schedules from 2018 until now, they are changing their stance whenever it's more favorable to them by stating that they actively promoted with various TV appearances, OST, and overseas tour in 20 countries with over 50 concerts in their March 3rd statement in the press. Until now, the Rose has deceived the agency with numerous lies, including unauthorized absences, problems with romantic partners, and contact and creative activities with third parties, all of which has caused a major disruption to the agency's business plans that were prepared for a long time. These violations of obligations of good faith and maintenance of dignity, which are included in the exclusive contract. Despite this, we nonetheless embrace and forgave the Rose because of clear, irrevocable damage to their image if revealed to the public. The Rose has rejected even all conversation and informed us of a refusal to take part in promotions such as pre-scheduled concert plans and TV appearances, and announced the termination of their contract. Due to the Rose's unilateral notice, we are suffering huge losses and damages due to the non-fulfillment of plans and events. So again, that's just a portion of the statement. You can read the K-pop Source article for their full statement. But I was just like blown away when I read this, Kelly. I don't know, like some of the language that they're using, but again, like you're more familiar in your experience and hearing the horror stories like you shared
Mm.
before of just how these companies behave and when they want to, like how they say they they forgave. Nonetheless, they embraced them and forgave them.
Again,
Like,
it's
oh,
ownership, and there is this
it's
thing.
ownership.
I mean,
Right.
I have literally heard the term that the talent are just the ants. And it's true. You are
Yeah.
literally the lowest of the lowest denominator. And it's only the lucky top echelons of the music career that actually come out of this unscathed. Most artists get burnt. At some point in their life, they get burnt one way or another. And I hate to say a lot of
Yeah.
the time it's through record labels.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of the stuff we talked about when we went through their discography of how fast they wrote the Dawn album, how
Yeah.
fast they had to write it, record it, all the mixing, mastering, and then them being out to do all the promotion, music video, filming, concept photo shoots, right? And that was in between a time period of writing an album in May or June while they were on a tour at the
Mhm.
time to releasing that same album in October of that same year,
Yeah.
and how grueling that must have been, right? Like we've kind of even just noticed ourselves as we've been really looking into their history and their release schedule. Yeah, so it's not a
It
surprise that
and
they
it's
were feeling this.
And it's not organic development either. So it isn't what
Mhm.
you would truly have development wise, even with a major label. Even a major label goes, actually, do you know what? We might need to sit back and just give you 5 minutes. You are allowed a
Yeah.
fortnight's holiday. Whereas actually looking at their sort of schedule as such, from debut to up until the moment that this was filed and they terminated their contract in their minds, obviously, because it wouldn't have been terminated immediately until it was finalised in the courts.
Right.
Up until that point, it was chocker. It was literally a solid run all the way through. And I am
Right.
surprised that they didn't have more illness and mental issues, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we felt like when we talked about the Dawn album, that we felt like they were probably leaning into those feelings of burnout and depression that were really probably creeping in at that time. And we felt like
Mm.
that Dawn album probably was inspired a lot by how they were feeling at that point in time, which is not a surprise. So the Rose, this prompted the Rose to, through their legal representation, release their own formal statement. Again, listeners, this full statement is available in the Sumpy article that we've linked. I'm just going to read again just a portion. Quote, "First, we would like to send words of consolation to the Rose's fan club, Black Rose, who are worrying more than anyone else due to this situation. After the Rose debuted in August 2017, they promoted actively as celebrities by releasing 5 albums in 3 years, having a world tour, at least 50 concerts in 20 different countries, featuring in various broadcasts, including JTBC's Superband and KBS's Immortal Songs, holding solo concerts in Seoul and Busan, and featuring in advertisements SK Telecom, Flow, and releasing OSTs for dramas Strangers from Hell, Itaewon Class, and more. The Rose received their balance statement from their agency J&Star Company on January 31st, 2020. Despite the fact that the exclusive contract states that payment should occur every month, the first balance statement was distributed on March 27th, 2019. At the time, there were no earnings to be distributed, and enough profits to be distributed were earned at last in 2019. However, even then, one member had a negative balance and no profits to be distributed to him. So let's take a step back and kind of talk through that, Kelly. I think first what struck me was the Rose calling out, to their fans, to Black Roses. Because for fans at that time, this must have been really heartbreaking to see. You probably didn't know much about exactly what was happening, but you could read it through this press. And so it must have been really scary for fans to not know what was going to happen, to the band and to the group. But then hearing the balance, that takes me back to kind of what you talked about with these companies giving you some sort of advance that then you've got to like pay back. And so here the company's kind of coming at them basically saying like, okay, well you didn't make any money,
Yeah,
and one
so-
member's in the negative.
So their contract will have more than likely involved the apartment that they lived in together, but they won't have given that for free. That will have been charged out of their earnings, and then any subsequent travel, anything like that. So they would have been given not an advance as such, but the money would have been there in the pot. So if it had been needed to be used for any reason whatsoever at all, you could in theory end up with a negative amount, even though we know that the Rose, when they write, tend to write in a way where they all have a writing credit on every single track. Yeah, it just shows you how unfair these things are and how biased they are to the agencies and the record labels and the management deals. Because bearing in mind, I mean, this is another thing we've got to mention, like when you get onto management, even they take a cut as well.
Sure, right. Everybody's got to have their piece.
What you're earning.
And I think of even in this show Photosynthesis, I think they talked about it at the end of maybe episode 4 when they were all sitting around drinking, or maybe it was at the beginning of episode 4. But how poor they were, right?
Yeah.
Like they've talked about when they were first starting out that
And
they
I think,
couldn't
like,
afford to.
Didn't I do the actual conversion and it worked out that it was something like 40 quid that they were living on?
Yes. I mean, like if they were trying to go out and have a meal together or like go out and drink, Like, that they would say they would basically go to the convenience store, get that, like, bottle of soju that probably cost, $1 or $2 and get drunk off that and then go to the bar, because they couldn't afford probably the higher priced drinks at the bar.
Sounds like being a student.
Yeah. Yes, it's like
Basically
being a
being a
poor
student.
college student with, like, no money. Exactly. So this dispute escalates into a legal battle with both sides now presenting conflicting claims, like we saw in those two statements. The arbitration process between the Rose and J&Star Company lasted about 18 months, Kelly. That's a long time.
It is, but
Um,
if you think about the
yeah.
dispute that was in place with Prince and his former record label,
Mm.
and the fact
Oh,
that he
that's
actually
true.
had to change his name to a symbol
Yeah.
to actually
Yeah.
carry on
Right.
producing music off of his own back, it gives you an idea of how long these things take, and then literally how it how many issues it can create for the artist. I mean, there was a reason that
Right.
Prince used to refer to himself as a slave, and he was a slave
Yes.
for the record
Right.
label. And that man did everything else himself.
Right.
First album, he played all 27 instruments.
Right.
So for him to be writing,
Mm.
composing, recording, playing all of the instruments and still not make any money, that tells you how unlevel this is.
So the resolution was reached by mid 2021, granting the Rose independence from J&Star Company. There's really no publicly available records of the arbitration process between the Rose and J&Star Company. While the dispute was handled through the Korean Commercial Arbitration Board, specific details of the proceedings really haven't been disclosed in public documents or reports. But to the point you made about Prince, one thing we obviously know came out of it, which I think is a massive win for any artist going through this kind of process, is they got to keep the name. And that doesn't
Yes.
always happen, as we
No, it
see with
doesn't.
Prince. And so that was huge. So they obviously don't have the masters to their old songs. We've
Mhm.
said that several times.
That
Um, I
that
still
will
give a plug to the Rose. They need to re-record that
they
old
need to
music so that
re-record.
they can.
That will have been
Yeah.
basically, I mean, at the end of the day, what they're looking at is a divorce. It is a divorce from a record label. And it will be,
Yeah.
right, you get the kids this week, I get the kids next week. And it will be the fact that the
Yeah.
record label have kept the masters, even though they've not done anything with those masters. They are completely within their right to do something with the masters. I mean, the agreement may have had the fact that they can't do anything with them for a certain length of time. If they don't do anything with them for a certain length of time, the guys might be able to actually buy the masters back. That's something that is truly
Mhm.
legitimate, but it might not be worth their time to spend that much money buying old masters.
Right.
Money's
Yeah.
better spent elsewhere. And the fact that obviously they managed to keep the name, and that's one of the biggest things.
It's not prevented them legally from being able to still perform those songs. And so I agree with you. It's not financially, it doesn't make financial sense to buy
No,
the masters.
no. So,
As long
so
as they can still go out and perform those songs,
Yeah, so
that's what
when a
matters.
writer writes something, they have autonomy over that. They have copyright of it. That is their
Mhm.
creation. Nobody else can touch that. They have the sole usage of what they have created. However, once it is taken into a physical format, a recorded format, dependent on who records it, how it's recorded, it then becomes a master. And that is,
Mhm.
it is the recording, and it's who, and a lot of the time it's who paid for the recording, who developed the recording,
Mhm.
everything else. So if an artist has paid for the recording themselves, generally speaking, unless they've struck some weird deal, that is their masters. They hold their masters. And I am happy to say anything that I have ever recorded, I have my own masters. So
Good for you.
yeah,
Good
but
for
that is
you.
literally hearing horror stories from other people. So one of the other lecturers
Yeah.
that we had when I was doing my training, and I can't for the life of remember what his name was. He was like the ultimate old boy punk. You know, one of those guys that you meet and he's got neck damage from headbanging. He was one of those.
Mm.
He was brilliant though, absolutely love him. And he worked with some of the really big punk acts in the late 70s and the early 80s. He talked about some of the absolute horrors that he'd seen in
Yeah.
relation to
I feel
people not
like
owning the masters.
yeah. I feel like if nowadays, like if you want to be an up and coming artist, I feel like you should educate yourself on all of these things. I mean, you've
Yeah.
done this, throughout your career. You've educated yourself on the business side. And I think the Rose has too,
You
and
have
maybe some of
to.
it has come not from what they've wanted to have to do, but they have that kind of goes into the legal battle. I think one of the things we
Mm.
wanted to highlight is listeners, you maybe if you didn't know much about this time, if you're a newer fan, because a lot of fans have come on after this point, you might not have known this history. Um, Sammy basically had the burden of representing the Rose
Yeah.
in court throughout most of this legal battle. The reason why he had the burden was because during this time, the other three members of the Rose, who are Korean citizens, Sammy is Korean American, they went and did their mandatory military service. And so Dojun left for the military July 6th of 2020. Hajun enlisted October 12th, 2020, and Jaehyun enlisted November 9th, 2020. So remember, this jumped off in February 2020 and lasted a year and a half. Military service is a year and a half to 2 years. Actually, when the guys were going through it, it might have still been 2 years. It's now 18 months. So the guys were gone.
Mm.
So Uzong was doing this all on his own. And I just think of how brave he was to go through this mostly on his own and what that must have been like for him to, I think during this time, he had to educate himself a lot
Very
on the
much so.
business side and the legal side. And I think
Yeah.
that set them up for ultimately coming out of this launching their own record label,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
now what we call Windfall, what we know
Yeah.
of as Windfall Records. So yeah, I just think that was incredible of him.
I have so much respect for him for doing that, because that going into court's horrible at the best of times, but to actually have to do this and stand and basically stand firm on your beliefs without the backup of the rest of the band. Yeah, all the respect in the world for him.
Yeah, all the respect for Sammy. I mean, it's incredible. This is interesting, Kelly. For their third anniversary, they did release a single. So it is what a lot of fans know of. It's called Black Rose. It was a song to their fans. It was released on August 24th, 2020. So before Hajun and Jaehyung enlisted in the military, but after Dojun had enlisted. How do you think they were able to release this given the proceedings that were happening between J&Star? Do you have any thoughts there?
I would have actually thought, I mean, because obviously they'd applied for termination. And by this point, I
Mhm.
hate to say it, whatever they did after the point of applying for termination wouldn't be included in the argument. So the argument
Mhm.
would be what had occurred up until the point of the request for termination. So after that, they could have gone out and, done whatever the hell they wanted to. So yeah, I think they did that off their own back, to be honest. It wouldn't have had
And
any sort of
it's not on any physical album. So it's
no, it's a
only a
digital
digital
release.
release. So
Yeah.
they wouldn't have had to worry about distribution and, how to create the physical album itself and get it distributed and
No, it
things like
would it would
that.
be a very simple distribution deal with a digital distributor, which anybody who has
Mhm.
music on Spotify or Apple Music will use a digital distributor.
Yeah, kind of wondered that during this time. So now we're at the point, listeners, where they've come away. They're free. During this time, Sammy also was working a lot on his solo music. And then the guys come back from military. Now we're getting into 2022 and come back and make what we know as one of their most iconic albums ever, the Heal album. But prior to that, they do form their own label, Windfall Records, and go into a partnership with Transparent Arts. So why don't you kind of talk about, let's lean back into some of what you shared in some of the types of deals and record labels. So Windfall Records, you would classify as an independent label, correct?
They are. Yes, they are an independent. They are as independent as you can possibly get because they are at present, and I will say at present, they only represent themselves. And
Yeah.
it is the best way to deal with it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a business. So if you're a business, you have to pay taxes and all of those wonderful things. So you need to put it under the umbrella of a business. And that's what they've done. It is literally that.
Yeah. And I think let's reinforce that back to multiple conversations we've had, Kelly, around the challenges we know that come from representing themselves and being this own independent label. I mean, you even talked about it in, the last episode when you were talking about how the cogs, as this band
Yeah.
grows, their cogs need to get bigger. And we suspect that's kind of being a challenge for them right now, and the cost of touring. So fans get upset because things are costing more. I think people again just need to kind of realize there is not some big label backing them. This is money out of their own pocket.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Is the label your label?
So yeah, we have partners. So our label is called we made it in Korea. It's called Windfall.
Yes.
Right, our first name. And we have managing partners, which is Transparent Arts, and basically we do everything together. So
That's great.
yeah,
That's pretty sick.
it's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Not a lot of groups have that power and that ability and have that trust in collaborators like that.
Yeah, we're thankful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you want, you really could take 2 leaps forward.
Yeah, no, honestly.
Oh, yeah.
We could also just break, fall down, but that's okay too.
Yeah.
It's a lot of responsibilities, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's all on your shoulders, right? There's nobody to blame.
Yeah.
We talked about that the last time.
Yeah.
It's all you.
Yeah, it's all us.
No scapegoats here.
Nope.
Only entrepreneurs.
Yeah. So and this is the worst thing. I cannot remember the name of the band. It will come to me at some point. So there is an American pop punk band. 2 of the members are brothers, and they actually went onto a game show.
Is it the Madden brothers? Benji and Joel? Is it their band? Oh, okay.
No, it's not Good Charlotte. And went on to a game show. And they won it. It was the Fear Factor. That's what they did. They did the Fear Factor to win the money. Medina Lake. There we go. Medina Lake. My brain is working. So Medina Lake. And the 2 brothers went on to Fear Factor and competed and won. And they won, I think, there's quite a substantial amount. I think they won like $500,000 or something. They used that to bankroll their own record label and sort out their own distribution. And they have literally done everything else since themselves. But we're talking $500,000. How many people can go, oh, do you know what? I've just got $500,000 in my box. Use that to do it. You can't do that. And I mean, obviously, I'm sort of assuming the guys will have walked away with the money that was owed them and possibly some form of settlement as well, because there would have been defamation of character and all of those wonderful, wonderful things that they could have countersued for as well on top of it, because they were in a position where they were being called all sorts. And obviously the guys will have had to sign a non-disclosure after this and everything else. This is probably why the documents are also sealed as well, because it may have actually been done outside of court. But they will have probably had enough money to go, well, do you know what? We can set this in motion. We can do this ourselves. And that is the way to do it. Now, Transparent Arts have come in and they act as a partner. I don't know the ins and outs of their deal, but I'm assuming their deal is probably an artist deal that they have with them. I can't see it being a 360 deal, but they will have visibility and the sort of connections from Transparent Arts with them being the bigger artist. And I think that is possibly where that comes into play there. And they obviously act as some as a management partnership, but I think it's more a sort of a connection partnership and getting the right people in the
Yeah.
right places as such. Um, as they get bigger as artists, you need more cogs, you need bigger cogs. So this is when I was on about the fact you have distribution deals and licensing deals and all of these extra deals that you can have on top. Even independent artists need these things, and that is something obviously they do have. I don't know whether I would have thought they've got a licensing deal. We haven't seen anything that's gone on to any form of alternative media, but I would have thought they've probably got one in place.
I know they have said that they've been super interested in getting on like video game
Mm.
soundtracks or anime soundtracks or like, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I have friends that literally just write for that type of stuff. I mean, they just make soundtracks. That is their living. They literally write for games and films and TV
Yeah.
scores and everything else. And actually, they
And I
make a
think
really good living out of it.
think you hinted at this when, if you notice, listeners, if you go to the Windfall website, it has a link at the bottom that says family and it's like coming soon. So
Yeah,
while today there's only the Rose under Windfall, I think the future they're setting themselves up for, you said it a little bit in the last episode as well, their songwriting, them being able to be an independent label and bring on new emerging artists
yeah,
because they've been through the ringer, right? I think they would want to support other artists. They do write for other artists, they produce, they could do in-house production, they could do
yeah.
in-house writing support for these artists. I think that's their long-term future that they're setting
Yeah, it
themselves
is.
up for, which
Yeah,
is
it is.
smart.
Yeah, it is. Record label, songwriting, management. You have to have a future plan. That plan has to be in place. Musicians come out of having a musical career and it's stopped for one reason or another. Um, and then they like, oh God, I've got to assimilate back into a normal life. What do I do?
Right.
And they
Right.
can't. So if you make plans beforehand, you're going to reap more return, shall I say, as you enter your later years. But you know what I mean. It's like as they get older,
Yeah.
they can start to
Yeah.
add to the family of the record label, etc., etc.
I remember in a past Rosecast episode, which I think listeners I mentioned was content that's on the Rosarium that was before the Rose Couch. I remember Sammy talking about his interest in a future of managing other artists. Like,
I can see him
I
doing
think he
really
even
well
gave
with
this
that.
story of going to see a major artist at this huge stadium tour or whatever. And in a way, he was like, I don't know if I want to see myself on that stage at that level. Like, I think he's more comfortable behind the scenes, in all honesty. I think he finds more comfort there, and I think he'd be an amazing manager to young artists. He's had to learn on the job. He's taught
Yeah,
himself a lot about the business. We both have said this. We think he drives a lot in terms of the business dealings of the Rose. And I think it'd be great for him in terms of his future.
I do as well. I think there is definitely a case of there's so much development there. There's so much understanding. And as I've said before, he's a people person. He knows how to talk to
Yeah.
people. He knows how to get the best out of people. I think he'd be really successful at it. And I'd love to pick his brain, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, but yeah, there's so many things in this industry that are just set up to take from artists and not necessarily give to
Yeah.
artists.
Which I think goes right into your being highlighting you today as our genius behind the scenes, as someone who is CEO of Ghost Depot Records. You've told me about your vision for your label, which I feel like it's exactly what you just said, right? Not a label that's going to take, but how you can truly be a collaborative partner. So why don't you tell our listeners a little more about your vision and what you're trying to set up and some of the challenges you're having to figure out and navigate?
So many challenges, it's unreal. And all the
Yeah.
knowledge in the world will never allow you to actually know what you're doing on a daily basis. So obviously I started working again as a musician. I mean, I'd been a musician, sort of semi-professional, for quite a while when I was younger, and then I gave up. I burnt out and I had to walk away from it and went to work in a corporate world, which, as much as I hated sitting behind a desk, actually in a way has really helped, because I understand corporate, and I think that's really important as a musician, because I don't think a lot do. Um, and obviously, I've seen friends go through major highs. You know, they've charted, they've had, you know, album sales, they're doing really well, they've played in arenas and all these other things. And then I've just seen them absolutely burn out and fall flat because of paperwork that was signed that they didn't quite understand. And somebody unscrupulous has come along and gone, you know, actually, you owe me this much, you owe me this much, you owe me this much.
Mm,
One of the things I was very adamant about was when we decided that we were going to start writing music, and it looked as though, actually, do you know what, we can do something with this, was we were going to self-release. And I said to the guys, do you know what, how about we set a label up? And the initial idea was basically self-release, we've got a label name, we're running as a business, we can sort everything out that way. And then it kind of evolved as I spoke to people. And what I really wanted to do was be a place eventually for full collaboration, but with independent artists. So I want to be somewhere that is a place of support, somewhere where you can come and say, do you know what? I need a hand with this. Can you offer me that service? Because the thing is, these days, most musicians, they have an audience, they have an outlet. The whole internet revolution has altered everything. I mean, you literally have
right.
TikTok artists who have got millions of followers, and they've never done
Mhm.
anything. I mean, most of them haven't even ever played a gig. I mean, which I find
Mhm.
insane, to be perfectly honest. I mean, they literally just sit in front of the camera, play a guitar, and people love them. But that's the age that we're in. But they're then at the point where once they get to a level, they don't have the supporting cogs behind them. So they
Right.
don't understand the concept of distribution, of promoters, of merchandise, of all of these wonderful things like licensing and everything else that goes along with it. And one of the things that I desperately wanted to do was to be able to work as a collaboration with artists who were independent and actually offer them the ability to pick and choose what they needed help with. And that's what I
Mm,
wanted to do, because to me, that's what I've always wanted. I always wanted to be independent myself. I always wanted to achieve all of these things off of my own bat. But I knew there was things I couldn't do. It didn't matter how much you network and how many people you know,
yeah.
you still don't necessarily have all of those cogs in place. And to be able to
Right, because
offer
as we
that,
said, that's why these young artists go into these deals with the record companies, whether
yeah,
it's an independent
exactly.
label or whether it's a major label, because they don't have that knowledge or ability. And so how amazing that you have this vision for being able to provide the level of support that independent artist needs, not everything that maybe they don't need, just to be able to, these artists then go into these deals just to get the portion that they need,
And
that ends up
exactly.
robbing them in
And
the end.
and it ends up destroying them. They end up burnt out. They don't want to make music, and they sign their
Right.
lives away for basically a bit of money. Well,
Yeah.
what worked out was a bit of money, because
Yeah.
actually the money that you're given spent on everything else. Um, I think one of my biggest challenges with it is, I hate to say it, is just believing in myself, the fact that I can actually do it. I mean, I know I've got the knowledge. It's a cutthroat
Yeah.
world to enter into. And I think I've had
Mhm.
to sort of give myself a talk every now and again and say, come on, Cal, you can do this. You're capable. If you can command a boardroom full of people having a conversation, you can do this
Yeah.
type of thing. And it's kind of, yeah, it's honestly, belief in yourself, having the network behind you, having people there
Mhm.
to support you and understand you. One of the biggest things obviously at the moment, so the first project we're working on, surprise surprise, is Spectral. So what we do is we work on a basis of, it's projects. It's not an album release or anything else. It is a
Mhm.
creative community. So we work with artists, we work with PR agents, we work with bookers and all sorts of people like that. And we get them together and we sort of say, what can we, how can you help, and everything else. So it's not literally just musical artists. We sort of work in a way where it's a collaboration of everybody that's involved, so all these geniuses behind the scene that then also fit into the
Mm.
remit of what goes into a record label and what goes into actually creating the final product. So our first project as such is Spectral. So we'll see how the proof is in the pudding as we go along, because we now have our release schedule.
Yay! Share that with our listeners, Kelly. Share your
So
release
do I get to
schedule.
make my first official announcement for this?
Yay! On K-Rock Cast!
Right. So our first single, which is a song called Saints of Excess, will be released on the 21st of May. And on the 22nd of
Yay!
May, the lyric video will be released for it. And we will also be doing a live station head show as well when the clock ticks midnight as well on the 21st. So we will have a premiere on that. So I'll post details of that a little bit closer to the date, but you'll be able to hear some of the wonderful music that we all listen to, which I will warn you now is all over the place. There's literally everything from jazz to K-pop to full-on thrash metal. There's everything in there. And
You
then you'll
gotta
get,
throw some of the Rose songs in there.
oh, come on. We always stick, well, should I say, I always stick one in. I always manage to sort of craftily sneak one in. And then the guys will be like,
Yeah, sneak one.
where's this one come from? Like, yeah, well, it's me that
Yeah.
always does the playlist. But yeah, so my guys will be on that as well. So yeah, you'll be able to hear the absolute rabble
Listeners,
that we are.
you wait till you hear Saints of Excess. I was lucky enough to get a sneak preview. It is an incredible song.
Oh, thank
Incredible
you,
song. I can't wait
thank
for it to
you.
come out, and we'll be promoting it definitely on K-Rock Cast. So,
Oh,
listeners,
thank you.
just wait. May 21st. Mark that in
Yeah,
your
May 21st.
calendars.
We're nearly there. How scary is that? And then our second single, which is Falling, which if anybody was at the Wolfpack meal in LA would have heard me sing a little bit a cappella. That comes
Yes.
out on the 3rd of September.
September
And
3rd.
yeah. And then on the 12th of September, our EP 1212 comes out.
Well, congratulations.
Thank
I'm
you.
so proud of you. Your bravery and your hard work, and here to support you and your vision for Ghost Depot Records. Yeah, I think from what we heard you describe, I think what you're looking to achieve is so important in terms of supporting artists, and
Yeah.
allowing artists to really, make the money off of their craft and their talent, and not all these other people making the money off their craft and talent.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
just to allow their independence and to allow them to develop how they want to develop, and allow it to be organic, because that's how the greatest
Yeah.
music is made. Um, I mean, you're not telling me that the Sex Pistols were sort of taken in by a record label and developed. They were not. At all.
And taking it back to like the Rose, I think of just from the start, it's been the four of them writing their music, writing their melodies, writing their lyrics, stepping up more in their own production. I mean, they've talked about in the photosynthesis and they're reminiscing how they did all of that in Dojun's little dorm room. So many of their early songs were written there, and just so proud that they were able to find their independence. But it doesn't come with challenges, right? Some of the things that maybe we're seeing them go through now as hiccups, they're just challenges when you are independent and you're doing this all on your own. But I have
Yeah.
so much respect for the Rose for, what they have been able to do
Oh God,
coming out
definitely.
of that contract termination and being able to stand on their own 2 feet and be successful and continue to climb in terms of their success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it is, to me, this time, I think it's very obvious that they really are doing a lot of the work themselves. And do you know what?
Yeah.
So much respect for them for doing it. So much respect.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, so much respect. I mean, all down to the artwork, right? We know that
Yeah.
Hajun has done all of the artwork for this album. Um, yeah, I mean, I think that's probably why they don't have multiple versions. They just
Yeah.
have one version of the deluxe album. I mean, I think it all comes into so much they're trying to do in-house themselves. They did all the writing, all the arrangement, all the composing. We suspect all the production. They
Yeah.
didn't, I don't think, really worked with much
No.
out from the outside except for some mastering and mixing that they
Mhm.
probably had some assistance with. And as we said
Yeah.
in the last episode, they're doing all of this for other artists right now too.
Yeah.
So they're also writing and producing for other artists on top of this. So,
Show
we
offs.
we I know, yeah. Amazing
Show off.
how they can keep it all together. Well, thank you, Kelly. I think that was a great deep dive in terms of the world of record labels and I'm proud of you. I think congrats to you and excited to see your future success, especially when your single comes out on May 21st, Saints of
Thank you.
Excess.
Thank you
Yeah.
very
All
much.
right, let's go into our humor segment. Kelly, I feel like I've beaten you up a little too much the last couple would you rathers or zombie apocalypse. Uh, so I went
Hey,
with two
I
good
have my
things
plan and I'm
this
sticking
time.
to it.
I'm
I'm gonna
sorry.
pick up on
It's
that
like
plan.
I swear that like I won't go off on some weird fantasy tangent on this one, Kelly.
Are we
Okay,
sure?
I swear I won't.
Are we sure?
I,
Because if you do
well,
that
I don't
again,
know.
woo, hello.
I know. I say that and then I'll probably get going with my delusional mind. But
Yeah,
here's a
it will.
fun one. Two good things you have to pick from.
Okay. Okay.
Would you rather participate in a gaming marathon with Jaehyun playing Overwatch? Or would you rather do a movie marathon with Dojun watching Marvel movies?
Ooh, these are two good ones, actually.
I know. I know.
These
I
are
hope
two
this
good
was a good
ones.
one.
Right.
Though you're a Marvel girl, so I feel
I
like
know it kind of gives it away immediately, doesn't it? I mean, don't get me
but you
wrong.
like video games,
I
right?
love
Do you
video
like gaming?
games. I love gaming, but the only
Yeah.
problem is, and I don't know whether it's just because I'm getting old, but I start to feel a bit motion sickness now. I used
I
to play
know.
so much when I was younger. And like, I don't know
I
whether it's
know.
my eyesight deteriorating or whatever it is. I sound like I'm getting my pension tomorrow. But I don't know. I get motion sickness now. So if you're playing like a first person shooter, there are
Yeah.
moments where I literally, and you shouldn't do this while you're playing. I have to look away from the screen because I
I
just
know.
can't
I
play
can't.
anymore.
I'm with you. Those first person games, I can't do it either.
I mean,
They do make me sick.
I'm a huge Star Wars fan. You know how much of a nerd I am.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
But I mean, I played like the last game and I nearly threw up about 5 times. I was just like, I can't do this. I couldn't get through like the first 3 segments. I was just like, oh no, my gaming days are over. So I would love to sit with Jay and play Overwatch, but it's not happening because I'd probably end up throwing up. However, one, I am a huge, huge, huge movie fan anyway. I love films. And two,
Yeah.
I am a Marvel nerd as well. So yeah, no, I would do the movie marathon in a heartbeat.
Wouldn't that be fun with Dojun?
And you do
Just be like,
realise though, it'd be proper like nerd fest. It's like, did you see that? That relates to that.
I
That relates to that. That relates to that. Hold on a minute. I'm sorry. Hold on a minute. Was that Daredevil? Hold on a minute. There was a crossover there with so and so and so and so. Where's Frank Castle
wouldn't
coming?
that's what would make it so fun. I totally would pick this too because I'm not really a gamer. Like I don't really play games, but I mean seriously, the last game I played was like Duck Hunt. Like Nintendo Duck Hunt from like 1989. And I cheated. I was totally that kid, Kelly, who put the gun up to the screen and
That's
just
how you
like
do it.
shot everything from Yeah, I totally cheated. So I'm definitely gonna do Netflix and chill with Dojun.
Yeah, no. Don't go down the sus content. That means something very different. And also, you couldn't do Netflix for this. It's Marvel. This would have to be Disney. Get the
Netflix
facts
and
right,
chill,
Missy.
Dojun.
Oh, you are. I worry about
Disney
you.
Plus and chill.
It doesn't have the same ring to it, really, does it? Disney Plus and chill.
No, but I'm with you. I think he'd be so fun to watch all the movies with. Plus, like, I'm a total talker when it comes to movies. I love digging in and talking to people about the movie. It bothers the people I watch movies with, but I don't care. I'm always like,
Please
oh my
tell
God,
me.
I can't believe that happened.
Please tell me you wait until the film's finished, because I'd be punching you if you did it.
No, I'm going to be talking to you the whole time.
No, don't do that. You have to sit. Look, what you do is you have to do this one of 2 ways. You sit and watch the entire film and then explode at the end of it. But obviously it's Marvel, so you have to wait until after the credits so you can actually see the post scenes. Let's get it right, because if you don't watch the post scenes, you don't know what's happening next. Or what you do is you do like the old-fashioned intermission in between.
Oh, that's
And
what
so
I
you
need.
play so long, and then you do an old-fashioned intermission. Why have I now got Monty Python in my head and John Cleese walking down the Rose Bowl in LA with the ice cream lady's uniform going, Albatross! Anybody want it? Sorry, that's probably lost on a load of people, isn't it?
I'm super annoying. I'll be that person who's like, oh my God, Kelly, pause it for a second.
No.
And then I'll be like waffling on about something. Okay, go play. And then I'm like, pause it for a second again.
No. The worst thing
is Dojun would be like that. Don't you think Dojun would be like that? I think he's a talker during movies.
The worst thing with me is, so I've let the side down, so I haven't been out and seen Thunderbolts on the day it came out, which is unheard of for me. I don't normally see it on the day it comes out, which means I've had to literally avoid YouTube and all my weird selection of sort of Easter egg programs that I watch, and it's been flashing up like, here's the end credit, and I'm like, no, I don't want any information until I've seen it.
You don't want the spoilers. Except I like spoilers, so I'm the person that's gonna watch all those before I see the movie.
No. I just hope Marvel gets back on its game, to be perfectly honest. But saying that, I don't know if anybody's seen the latest Daredevil series, but that's not bad.
Ooh.
CGI is a bit dodgy in places, but decent storyline, and the cast are fantastic.
Isn't Dojun's favorite? Is it Iron Man? Is that his favorite?
Yeah, he's Iron Man. Yeah, definitely.
What's your favorite?
For me, out of the movies, or who my favorite characters are?
Out of the movies.
Out of the movies, so Loki. I'm slightly
Oh,
obsessed with
yeah.
Loki. Gotta love Loki. Loki's the best character ever. And Winter Soldier as well.
Oh,
I kind
yeah.
I kind of like my sort of grey characters. I must admit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like Doctor Strange.
Oh
I
God, yeah.
love
Doctor Strange is brilliant. Yeah.
those movies are great. And then I like Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I like
Everybody likes
those.
Guardians of the Galaxy. That's the law. If you don't
Yeah.
like Guardians of the Galaxy, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, there's something wrong with you. Those are so fun. Those are so good. All right, well,
But
listeners, this was a fun one. There was no
I
bad
know.
choice here. There's no evil choice here,
No, but
which
there is
means next
possibly a
time
next
next
time it
time I'll
will
have to
be.
go back to be evil and naughty. Naughty.
Yeah.
I'll give you a naughty one.
Oh, for God, will you stop doing the bloody British accent? Oh, no, why is it with you bloody lot and doing a British bloody accent?
I know, my British accent's horrible too. If I ever come visit you, I gotta make sure I don't just go into weird British accent.
Some of the other ones I've heard are absolutely terrible as well, but we won't get into that.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Please, sir, can I have some more? Mr. Bumbo, can I have some more water?
All right, listeners, tell us what you would pick. Are you doing a gaming marathon with Jaehyun playing Overwatch? Or are you going to be like Kelly and I and enjoy our movie marathon, our Disney Plus and chill with, Kelly's giving me the face, guys. Marvel movies with Dojun. Join us next time, listeners. Our deep dive, we are going to be going back into the discography of Woo-sung with his debut solo album EP, Woof. I'm excited for this, Kelly. I was telling you, I have not really dug into these songs. So I'm excited to dust off the Woof album
I
and
love that
dive into
EP.
those songs.
I do love that
I
EP. So
know.
there's some great
It
ones
is
on that.
good. Yeah, there's some really good ones. Listeners, please rate our podcast. Leave us comments about this episode. We'd love to hear your feedback. Follow us on social media if you don't already. Instagram, TikTok, and X, all across the board. We're at krock_cast.
Click here to subscribe.
Email us at krock.cast@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out our website, www.krockcast.com. All right, thanks everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.